The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a metal cathedral. Hundreds of alien delegates filled the curved seats that rose up toward the ceiling. Their strange voices created a buzzing noise that echoed off the walls. At the center of it all stood Hyunwoo Kim, the human ambassador. Hyunwoo kept his face calm, but inside he felt angry. He had been coming to these meetings for 10 years. Every time it was the same story. The aliens would demand something from humanity. The humans would provide it. Then the aliens would ask for more. Behind him stood General So-Young Park. She wore her military uniform with pride, but her hands were closed into fists. Next to her was Captain Dongmin Lee, the youngest fleet commander in human history. His dark eyes watched the alien delegates with careful attention. The Vorthak delegate rose from her seat. Prime Minister Velthara was tall and thin, with gray skin that looked like old metal. Her people controlled most of the galaxy's banking systems. When she spoke, others listened. "The human fleet will go to the Andorian sector," she said. Her voice was cold and sharp. "The mining colonies there need to be controlled. The native people are causing trouble for our operations." Hyunwoo had heard this before. Many times. The aliens would find a planet with valuable resources. They would set up mining operations. When the local people fought back, they would call it a rebellion. Then they would ask humans to fix the problem. "You mean the people who lived there first don't want their world destroyed?" Captain Lee said quietly. Velthara's eyes turned to him. "The natives signed agreements, they must honor those agreements." "Agreements they couldn't read," General Park added, "written in languages they don't speak, for resources they didn't know existed." The other alien delegates began to make angry noises. The Zephyrians breathed through tubes connected to their faces. When they got upset, the tubes made a hissing sound. The Luminar people were made of living crystal. When they were angry, they glowed with red light. Now the hall was filled with hissing and red flashes. Velthara raised her hand for silence. "For 300 years, humanity has served the Galactic Council. We gave your species protection when you were weak. We shared our technology. We allowed you to join civilized society. In return, you provide military services." Hyunwoo stepped forward. "We've done more than provide military services. Human soldiers have died in every corner of this galaxy. We've fought your wars, protected your trade routes, and kept the peace between your species. And what do we get in return?" "You get to survive," said Chancellor Xeris of the Zephyrians. His breathing tubes hissed with each word. "Without the Council's protection, humanity would have been destroyed long ago." "By who?" asked Captain Lee. "Every major threat to this galaxy has been stopped by human forces. The Ravager pirates were defeated by human fleets. The Crimson Plague was cured by human doctors. The Void Hunters at the galaxy's edge are held, backed by human monitoring stations." The alien delegates looked uncomfortable. They didn't like being reminded of these facts. Velthara's voice grew colder. "You forget your place, mammals. The Council has made a decision. Human forces will deploy to the Andorian sector within 1 standard week. The mining operations must continue without interference." Hyunwoo looked at his 2 companions. General Park gave a small nod. Captain Lee's jaw was tight, but he also nodded. They had talked about this moment for months. They had hoped it would never come, but they were ready. "No," Hyunwoo said simply. The word seemed to echo in the sudden silence. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The idea of humans refusing a direct order from the Council was unthinkable. Then the hall exploded with noise. Alien delegates jumped from their seats. They shouted in dozens of different languages. Some pounded on their desks. Others made threatening gestures. "You cannot refuse," screeched a crystalline delegate. "It is not permitted." "The agreements are clear," hissed Chancellor Xeris. "Humans must obey Council directives." Hyunwoo waited for the noise to die down. When it finally did, he spoke in a calm, clear voice. "We have read those agreements carefully. We have provided military service for 3 centuries. We have paid any debt we might have owed to this Council many times over. We refuse to be your attack dogs any longer." Felthara's gray face became darker. You will reconsider this decision. The Council will give you 24 standard hours to come to your senses. We don't need 24 hours, General Park said. Our answer will be the same tomorrow, as it is today. We will not attack innocent people to protect your mining profits. The Vorthak Prime Minister stood to her full height. She was nearly 8 feet tall, and she used every inch to try to intimidate the humans. Very well. If humanity chooses to break their sacred obligations, then humanity will face the consequences. She turned to address the full council. I call for an immediate vote on Resolution 2847, the expulsion of humanity from the Galactic Council, and the termination of all treaties, trade agreements, and diplomatic protections. The vote was quick. Too quick. The aliens had been planning this, Hyunwoo realized. They had wanted an excuse to cut ties with humanity for some time. The humans had become too independent, too willing to question orders. The results were announced. By the council secretary, a small mouse-like creature called a nibbler. Resolution 2847 passes by a vote of 847 to 23, with 156 abstentions. Effective immediately, humanity is expelled from the Galactic Council. All human diplomatic staff must leave council space within 72 hours. Hyunwoo gathered his papers calmly. He had expected this outcome. So had his government back on Earth. They had been preparing for this day for years. As the 3 humans walked toward the exit, Velthera called out to them. You'll be back, she said. Within a month you'll be begging for readmission. Your little species cannot survive on its own. Hyunwoo paused at the doorway. He turned back to look at the hundreds of alien faces staring at him. Most looked angry. Some looked satisfied. A few looked worried. Prime Minister, he said quietly, I think you're about to discover which species really can't survive on its own. The door closed behind them with a soft hiss. The 3 humans walked down the long corridor toward their ship. None of them looked back. Behind them, the Galactic Council continued their session. They had other business to discuss, other decisions to make. They were already planning how to manage without human interference. They had no idea that within a year, most of them would be dead. Admiral Jae-ho Choi sat in his command chair aboard the battleship Gwangaeto. The message from Earth High Command had arrived 3 hours ago. It was the order they had all been waiting for, but hoping would never come. Begin Operation Homecoming, he said into his communicator. All human forces are to withdraw from non-human space immediately. Across the galaxy, human commanders received the same message. On 17 different worlds in 43 space stations and aboard 218 starships, humans began to pack up and leave. The withdrawal was not random or rushed. Humanity had been planning for this possibility for decades. Every human facility had evacuation procedures. Every human officer knew exactly what to do. The aliens had thought they were getting rid of a troublesome species. They had no idea they were dismantling the galaxy's entire support system. Colonel Mi Young-seo stood on the observation deck of the Kepler 442b mining station. Below her, the Altarian crystal mine stretched across the planet's surface like glowing scars. Human soldiers had protected these mines for 60 years. They had fought off pirate raids, settled disputes between workers, and maintained the equipment that kept the crystals flowing. Ma'am, said Sergeant Jinwoo Park, the last transport is ready to leave. Mi Young nodded. She walked to the communication console and opened a channel to the Altarian mine managers. This is Colonel Seo, she said. Human forces are now withdrawing from Kepler 442b. You are responsible for your own security from this point forward. The blue-skinned Altarian on the screen looked confused. But Colonel, the Ravager pirates have been gathering in the next system. Our intelligence says they plan to attack within days. That is no longer a human concern, Mi Young replied. You wanted independence from human interference. You have it. Good luck. She cut the connection and walked toward the transport. As she boarded, she left behind a small recording device. It would broadcast a message to anyone who came looking for human help. The Galactic Council has terminated all agreements with humanity. We are no longer authorized to provide protection, maintenance, or assistance of any kind. The same scene played out on dozens of worlds. Human peacekeepers abandoned their posts. Human engineers shut down their terraforming projects. Human doctors closed their hospitals and medical research stations. Dr. Sung-Ho Yoon had spent 15 years studying alien diseases at the Galactic Disease Control Center. He had helped develop cures for 17 different plagues that threatened various alien species. Now he was packing his research notes into sealed containers. Dr. Yoon called his Zephyrian assistant. "What about the Crimson Plague samples? The outbreak in the Outer Rim is getting worse." Dr. Yoon looked at the sealed containers that held years of research. The Crimson Plague was a terrible disease that attacked the breathing systems of gas-breathing species, like the Zephyrians. Without constant research and new treatments, it would spread across their space like wildfire. "I'm taking all human research with me," he said. The Council made it clear they no longer need human expertise. They can develop their own cures. His assistant's breathing tubes fluttered with panic. "But doctor, we don't have the facilities or knowledge to continue this work alone." "Then you should have thought of that before expelling us from the Council," Dr. Yoon replied. The most important withdrawals were happening in deep space, far from any inhabited worlds. For 2 centuries, humanity had maintained a network of monitoring stations at the edge of the galaxy. These stations watched for threats from outside: pirates, hostile aliens, and things much worse. Captain Tae-hoon Kim commanded the deepest monitoring station, Outpost Vigilant. It was positioned at the very rim of the galaxy, watching the dark space beyond. For 50 years, this station had tracked the movements of entities that most aliens didn't even know existed. "Sir," said Lieutenant Hyojin Nam, "we're getting multiple contacts on the long-range sensors. The Void Hunters are moving again." Captain Kim looked at the display. The Void Hunters were humanity's greatest secret. They were an ancient species from outside the galaxy that consumed entire star systems. Human forces had been quietly fighting them for over a century, keeping them from entering populated space. "How long until they reach the first alien colonies?" he asked. "At current speed, 6 months," Lieutenant Nam replied. Captain Kim nodded grimly. "Send the data to Earth Command, then begin shutdown procedures. We're going home." "Sir, what about the alien colonies in their path? The aliens wanted us gone. They'll have to deal with the consequences themselves." One by one, the human monitoring stations went dark. The galaxy's early warning system vanished overnight. Ships that had relied on human-maintained navigation beacons found themselves lost in space. Trade routes that had been protected by human patrols suddenly became hunting grounds for pirates. On the industrial world of Vega Prime, engineer Won-sik Nam supervised the shutdown of the main power plant. This facility had been built by humans and maintained by human technicians for 80 years. It provided power to 6 different alien colonies in the system. "But you can't just leave," protested the Luminar administrator. His crystal body flickered with anxiety. "Our people don't know how to maintain this equipment." "You should have learned," Won-sik replied. "We offered training programs for decades. Your people always said it was too complicated, that humans could handle it. We'll double your salaries, triple them." Won-sik shook his head. "This isn't about money. The Galactic Council has expelled humanity. We have no legal right to be here anymore." As his transport lifted off from Vega Prime, Won-sik watched the industrial complex growing smaller below. Within days, the alien colonists would start having power problems. Within weeks, their life support systems would begin failing. They would try to fix things themselves, but they lacked the knowledge and experience. They would break more than they repaired. The pattern was the same everywhere humans withdrew. For 3 centuries, humanity had quietly become the galaxy's maintenance crew. They had built the infrastructure, trained the workers, developed the technology, and solved the problems that kept alien civilizations running. The aliens had seen humans as soldiers and diplomats. They had never realized that humans were also their engineers, doctors, teachers, and protectors. They had taken the invisible work for granted, noticing only the obvious services. Back on Earth, President Hyojin Moon watched the withdrawal reports in the Situation Room. Her military advisors updated her on the progress every hour. All human civilians have been evacuated from Council space, reported Defense Secretary Hae-won Kim. Military withdrawals are 70% complete. What about our monitoring networks? Asked the president. All deep space stations have been shut down, replied Admiral Choi via video link. The galaxy is now flying blind. President Moon nodded. She felt no satisfaction in what they were doing, but it was necessary. The aliens had made their choice. Now they would live with the results. How long do you estimate before they realize what they've lost? She asked. Our analysts predict major system failures within 6 weeks, said Secretary Kim. Complete infrastructure collapse within 6 months. And the external threats? Admiral Choi's face was grim on the screen. The Void Hunters will reach the first alien colonies in 5 months. The Ravager pirates are already mobilizing to attack unprotected systems. Various diseases will spread unchecked without human medical research. President Moon stood and walked to the window. Outside, Earth looked peaceful and beautiful, but she knew that soon the galaxy around them would be burning. Signal all our forces, she said. Complete the withdrawal as quickly as possible, and begin Phase 2 preparations. Phase 2, ma'am? Asked Secretary Kim. The aliens think they're getting rid of us, President Moon replied. They don't realize they're about to beg us to come back. The first sign of disaster came exactly 7 days after the humans left. Commander Jin-nae Ryu sat in the command center of Sanctuary Station, humanity's new border fortress. Banks of monitors showed her what was happening across the galaxy. It was not a pleasant sight. Ma'am, called Ensign Byung-ho Lee from the communication station. We're receiving a distress signal from the Altarian crystal mines. Ginny turned to look at the screen. The blue-skinned Altarian mine manager looked terrified. Behind him she could see smoke and flashing lights. Please, you must help us, the Altarian begged. The Ravager pirates attacked 3 hours ago. They've taken control of the main mining complex. Hundreds of workers are trapped. I'm sorry, Jin-ae replied calmly. But humanity no longer has authorization to operate in Council space. You'll need to contact the Galactic Council for assistance. We did. They said they're sending a fleet, but it won't arrive for 2 weeks. Jin-ae felt a moment of sympathy for the alien, but she pushed it aside. Then I suggest you negotiate with the pirates until help arrives. She cut the connection. Around the command center, her officers watched the displays with grim faces. They all wanted to help, but their orders were clear. No interference in Council space. The Altarian mines fell completely within 12 hours. The Ravager pirates stripped them clean and disappeared back into deep space. It was the first of many such attacks. Without human patrol fleets protecting the trade routes, pirates began hitting targets across the galaxy. The Zephyrian gas convoys were robbed. The Luminar crystal ships were captured. Even heavily defended Vorthak banking stations were attacked and looted. But the pirate attacks were just the beginning. Dr. Yoonji Han sat in her laboratory aboard the medical ship Hippocrates, watching reports from across former Council space. As humanity's leading expert on alien diseases, she understood better than most what was coming. The Crimson Plague has spread to 15 Zephyrian colonies, she told her assistant, Dr. Min Ho Jung. Without our research facilities, they have no way to produce new treatments. The plague had been contained for decades by human medical research. Every few months, the disease would mutate, and human scientists would develop new cures. Now, with the research centers shut down and the human experts gone, the plague was spreading faster than ever. How bad will it get? Asked Dr. Young. Dr. Han looked at her computer models. The numbers were terrible. The Zephyrian population will be reduced by 60% within a year, maybe more. Similar disasters were happening everywhere. The Luminar homeworld was experiencing power failures as their crystal cities cracked without proper maintenance. The Torvin mining worlds were collapsing as their automated systems failed. Even the advanced Vorthak were struggling as their computer networks crashed without human technical support. Captain Sojin Park monitored it all from her intelligence ship, the Silent Watch. Her job was to observe and report, not to intervene. It was one of the hardest assignments she had ever received. Captain, called her sensor operator. "The Kepler system just went dark. That's the fourth star system this month." So Jin checked her displays. When a star system went dark, it meant all communications had stopped. Usually, this happened because everyone in the system was dead. "What happened to them?" she asked. "Unknown. The last transmission mentioned equipment failures and life support problems." So Jin made a note in her log. The Kepler system had been home to 12 million crystalline colonists. Now it was silent and empty. The worst part was that the aliens still didn't understand what was happening. They thought these were just random disasters, bad luck, temporary problems. They didn't realize that humanity had been preventing these disasters for centuries. Lieutenant Commander Young Jin Kim was monitoring the Galactic Stock Exchange from his position aboard the economic analysis ship Adam Smith. The numbers told a story of complete collapse. "Trade volume is down 78%, he reported to his captain. "The galactic credit has lost half its value. Most interstellar shipping companies have declared bankruptcy." The reason was simple. Without human naval protection, interstellar trade had become too dangerous and expensive. Ships were being attacked, cargoes were being stolen, and insurance costs had become impossible to afford. "What about the major alien economies?" asked Captain Dae-Hyun-yoon. "The Vorthak banking system is experiencing massive runs on deposits. The Zephyrian gas trade has almost completely stopped due to pirate attacks. The Luminar crystal exports are down 90% because their main production facilities are failing." Captain Yoon shook his head. 300 years of galactic civilization, and it's collapsing in less than 6 months. The most frightening reports came from the deep space monitoring stations, or rather from the lack of such reports. For 2 centuries, human sensor networks had tracked threats from outside the galaxy. Now those networks were gone, and the galaxy was flying blind. Admiral Sun Wukang received the report while aboard his command ship near the edge of human space. The message had come from one of their few remaining deep space scouts. "Sir," said the communications officer, "Scout ship Magellan reports massive energy signatures approaching from outside the galaxy. Pattern matches Void Hunter fleet movements." The Admiral felt a chill run down his spine. The Void Hunters were humanity's most carefully guarded secret. They were an ancient species that consumed entire star systems, converting matter into energy for their massive ships. Human forces had been quietly fighting them for over a century, keeping them away from populated space. "How many ships?" he asked. "At least 50 dreadnoughts plus support vessels. They'll reach the first alien colonies in 4 months. Admiral Kang looked at the star charts. The Void Hunters were approaching through the outer rim, where several alien species had colonies. The Torvin system would be hit first, followed by the crystalline mining worlds, then the Zephyrian gas extraction platforms. "Do we have authorization to warn them?" asked his chief of staff. The Admiral shook his head. "Our orders are clear. No communication with Council species except in response to direct threats to human space." It was a cold decision, but necessary. The aliens had expelled humanity from galactic affairs. They would have to face the consequences alone. On Earth, President Hyojin Moon received hourly briefings on the galactic situation. Each report was worse than the last. "The Vorthak are requesting emergency humanitarian aid," reported her chief of staff. "Their homeworld is facing massive food shortages due to supply chain disruptions. The Zephyrians are begging for medical assistance with the plague outbreak," added Secretary Kim. "They're offering to pay any price for human help. The Luminari have sent formal apologies for supporting our expulsion," continued the briefing. "They want to negotiate separate peace treaties." President Moon listened to it all with a calm expression. Inside, she felt terrible about the suffering that was happening. But she also knew it was necessary. "What's our response to all these requests?" asked Secretary Kim. "The same response we've given to every request," President Moon replied. "We are no longer part of the Galactic Council. Any assistance would require a new formal agreement between humanity and the requesting species." "And the terms for such agreements?" President Moon walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, entire civilizations were dying because they had been too proud and stupid to value what humanity provided. Any species that wants human protection will accept human leadership, she said finally. No more junior partnerships. No more taking orders from aliens who don't understand the threats they face. If they want our help, they'll do things our way. Secretary Kim made notes. And if they refuse? President Moon turned back to face her advisors. Her expression was cold and determined. Then they can face the Void Hunters alone. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike any in their history. Half the delegates were missing, their homeworlds cut off by pirates or collapsed infrastructure. Those who remained looked desperate and frightened. Prime Minister Felthara of the Vorthak stood at the center of the chamber, but she no longer looked proud and commanding. Her gray skin had taken on a sickly color, and her hands shook as she spoke. The situation is worse than we feared, she announced. 17 star systems have gone completely dark. Trade has collapsed by 80%. The Crimson Plague is spreading unchecked through Zephyrian space. Our civilization is dying. Chancellor Xeris of the Zephyrians could barely speak through his damaged breathing tubes. The plague had reached his homeworld despite all their efforts to contain it. My people are dying by the millions, he wheezed. Without human medical research, we have no defense against the disease. From her position, aboard Sanctuary Station, Commander Jinny Ryu watched the council session through intercepted communications. The aliens were finally beginning to understand what they had lost, but it might be too late. Ma'am, called Lieutenant Suman Park, we're detecting massive energy signatures at the galaxy's edge. The Void Hunters have entered our space. Jinny felt her blood turn cold. She had been dreading this moment for months. The Void Hunters were not just another hostile alien species. They were something much worse, an ancient force that consumed entire star systems. How long until they reach the first inhabited worlds? She asked. 3 weeks to the Torvin system, 8 weeks to the crystalline colonies. Jinny opened a secure channel to Earth Command. This was bigger than politics or revenge. Billions of lives were at stake. On Earth, President Hyo-jin Moon was awakened in the middle of the night for an emergency briefing. Admiral Jae-ho Choi appeared on the secure video link, his face grim with exhaustion. Madam President, the Void Hunters have begun their advance into former Council space. We estimate they have 50 major ships, possibly more. President Moon sat up in bed, suddenly fully awake. Do the aliens know? Unknown. Without our deep space monitoring network, they have no early warning system. They probably won't detect the hunters until it's too late to evacuate. The president stood and walked to her window. Outside, Earth looked peaceful under the starlight. But she knew that same sky held a threat that could end galactic civilization forever. What are our options? She asked. We could send warning messages to the threatened systems, Admiral Choi replied. But even if they believe us, they don't have the military strength to fight the hunters. Only human fleets have ever successfully engaged them in battle. President Moon knew the terrible mathematics of the situation. The aliens had expelled humanity to get rid of an inconvenient moral voice. Now they were about to pay for that decision, with their lives. Any word from the council? She asked. Secretary Kim appeared on another screen. Dozens of requests for aid, Madam President. The Vorthak are offering to pay any amount for human protection. The Zephyrians are begging for medical assistance. Even the proud Luminar have sent formal apologies. And their response to our terms? Complete rejection. They're willing to pay for specific services, but they refuse to accept human authority over their governments. President Moon felt a flash of anger. Even facing extinction, the aliens were too proud to admit they needed human leadership. The next few weeks brought a steady stream of disasters. The Torvin system was the first to encounter the Void Hunters. The battle, if it could be called, that lasted less than 6 hours. Dr. Won-Sik Nam monitored the final transmissions from Torvin Prime aboard his research vessel. The messages painted a picture of complete helplessness. Unknown ships approaching at high speed came the first report. They're not responding to any communications. Ships are firing some kind of energy weapon. It's breaking down our planetary shields at the molecular level. The surface is dissolving. The ocean is turning into gas. Please, someone help us. Then silence. The entire Torvan system, home to 8 billion people, simply ceased to exist. The Void Hunters had converted all the matter, planets, moons, asteroids, even the star itself, into pure energy to fuel their advance toward the galaxy's core. Decal. News of Torvan's destruction finally reached the Galactic Council 3 days later. The emergency session that followed was chaos. "This is impossible," screeched the Luminar delegate. "Nothing could destroy an entire star system." "The humans," wheezed Chancellor Xeris. "They would know about this threat. They must have been fighting it for years." All eyes turned to the empty seats where the human delegation used to sit. For the first time, the aliens began to understand the true scope of their mistake. Velthara stood shakily, her deteriorating condition obvious. "To all, send an immediate message to Earth. Tell them we are willing to discuss their terms." The message reached President Moon within hours. She read it carefully while her advisors watched. "They want to negotiate," she told the room. "But they're still trying to maintain their independence. They want human protection without human authority." "What do you want to do, Madam President?" asked Secretary Kim. President Moon looked at the reports from across the galaxy. The crystalline worlds would be hit by the Void Hunters next, then the Zephyrian colonies, then the inner systems where billions more aliens lived. "Set up a meeting," she said finally, "but not on neutral ground. They come to us here on Earth, and they come as supplicants, not as equals." The Galactic Council's response came within hours. They agreed to send a delegation to Earth immediately. For the first time in galactic history, alien leaders would come to humanity's homeworld to beg for help. Ambassador Young-Sik Choi, who had replaced Hyunwoo Kim after the expulsion, prepared for the most important negotiation in human history. But this time, the roles were completely reversed. Instead of humans standing before alien judges, alien petitioners would come before human leaders. "What are our minimum demands?" he asked President Moon during their final briefing. "Total reorganization of galactic government under human leadership," she replied without hesitation. "Human veto power over all major decisions, human control of all military forces, human oversight of all research and development. And if they refuse?" President Moon looked at the intelligence reports. The Void Hunters were already approaching the crystalline mining worlds. Without human intervention, they would consume the entire galaxy within a decade. "Then they can fight the Void Hunters alone," she said. "And when their civilizations are extinct, humanity will expand into the empty systems they leave behind." It was a cold calculation, but President Moon knew it was the only way. The aliens had proven they couldn't be trusted to govern themselves responsibly. They had expelled humanity the moment human moral objections became inconvenient. Now they would either accept human leadership or they would face extinction. The alien delegation arrived at Earth 3 days before the Void Hunters were scheduled to attack the crystalline colonies. Velthara led the group, supported by medical equipment that kept her dying body functioning. Chancellor Xeris came wearing a breathing apparatus that filtered out the plague symptoms. Even the proud Luminar Prime Minister attended, his crystal body dimmed with humiliation. They were met at the lunar spaceport by Ambassador Choi and a full human honor guard. But it wasn't an honor guard for guests. It was a demonstration of human military power. The aliens were escorted to Earth under heavy guard, like prisoners rather than diplomats. The negotiations took place in the same room where President Moon had made the decision to withdraw from galactic affairs. This time, the humans sat at the head of the table while the aliens sat in chairs designed for supplicants. "You have something we want," President Moon said without preamble. "Survival. We have something you need, the power to provide it. Let's discuss terms." Velthara tried to maintain some dignity. "The Galactic Council is prepared to offer humanity full readmission with expanded voting rights." "No. President," Moon interrupted. "The Galactic Council is dead. You killed it when you expelled us. We're here to discuss the terms of your surrender." The word hung in the air like a physical blow. Surrender. The aliens had never imagined it would come to this. Outside the conference room windows, Earth's blue oceans and green continents looked peaceful and welcoming. But the aliens knew they were no longer negotiating as equals. They were begging for their lives, and humanity held all the cards. The human fleet that emerged from the solar system was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen before. Admiral J-Ho Choi commanded from the bridge of the massive dreadnought Taegukgi, leading an armada of 300 warships. For 1 year, humanity had been silent, isolated, preparing. The aliens had thought the humans were sulking in defeat. They had been wrong. "All ships report ready," announced Captain So-Min Lee from her position at the Fleet Communications Station. Phase 1 targets identified. Admiral Choi looked at the tactical display. The first target was the Void Hunter fleet, now consuming its way through the crystalline colonies. But unlike the desperate, hopeless defense the aliens had mounted, this would be a proper battle. "Signal the fleet," Choi ordered. "Engage the hunters. Show them what happens when they threaten inhabited worlds." The battle began at the edge of the crystalline system, where 5 Void Hunter dreadnoughts were feeding on the remains of a mining station. The alien colonists had tried to fight back with mining lasers and converted cargo ships. It had been a massacre. Captain Dongmin Lee commanded the carrier Sejong, leading the first wave of human fighters. His pilots had been training for this moment their entire lives, practicing against simulated Void Hunter tactics in secret facilities throughout human space. "All wings, this is Admiral Choi," came the voice over the communication system. "The galaxy is watching. Show them why they need us." The human fighters swept in like a storm of metal and fire. Their weapons had been upgraded with technology the aliens had never seen. Energy shields that could absorb Void Hunter dissolving beams, missiles that could track targets through hyperspace, guns that fired compressed matter at near-light speed. The Void Hunters had been used to easy victories against unprepared enemies. They had never faced an organized military response from a species that understood their capabilities and tactics. The battle lasted 18 hours, and when it ended, all 5 Void Hunter ships were floating wreckage. But destroying the immediate threat was only the beginning. Admiral Choi opened a communication channel to the surviving crystalline colonies. "This is Admiral Choi of the Human Hegemony Fleet," he announced. "Your system is now under human protection. Prepare to receive our administrators." Similar scenes played out across former council space. Human fleets didn't ask permission. They simply arrived and took control. Admiral So-Young Park led the second wave, targeting the pirate fleets and warlord armies that had carved up the galaxy after the humans left. The Ravager pirates who had captured the Altarian crystal mines found themselves facing the battleship, Chungmugong. They had been expecting another easy target. Instead, they encountered weapons that could crack their ships like eggs and shields they couldn't penetrate. "Surrender immediately and you will be treated as prisoners of war," Admiral Park announced over the communication channel. "Continue fighting and you will be destroyed." Most of the pirates chose to surrender. Those who didn't were eliminated with cold efficiency. But the humans weren't just conquering. They were rebuilding. Dr. Yoon Ji-han arrived at the plague-stricken Zephyrian worlds aboard the medical ship Hippocrates. But she came with conditions. "Can provide treatment for the Crimson Plague," she told the desperate Zephyrian officials. "But treatment comes with permanent human medical oversight. Your entire healthcare system will be reorganized under human authority." The Zephyrians had no choice. Their people were dying by the millions. They agreed to every human demand. Engineer Wansik Nam led teams to the failed Luminar colonies where the crystal cities were cracking and the power systems were failing. But he didn't just fix the problems. He rebuilt the entire infrastructure, under human specifications. "Your people never understood the technology you were using," he told the Luminar administrators. "From now on, all major systems will be maintained by human engineers. Your role will be to follow our instructions." The pattern repeated across the galaxy. Wherever humans went, they didn't just solve immediate problems. They took control of entire systems and governments. It wasn't conquest in the traditional sense, it was more like adoption. The aliens had proven they couldn't take care of themselves, so humanity would take care of them. The transformation was swift and total. Within 6 months, the old Galactic Council was completely defunct. In its place stood the human hegemony, with Earth as its capital, and humans in every position of real authority. President Hyojin Moon, now styled as first director of the hegemony, addressed the galaxy from the same chamber where the old council used to meet. But the dynamics had completely changed. Where once human ambassadors had stood before alien judges, now alien representatives sat in junior positions while humans made the decisions. The old system failed because it was built on false assumptions, she announced to the assembled delegates. You assumed that all species were equal in capability and wisdom. You assumed that democracy could work between peoples who had fundamentally different values and understandings. You were wrong. Former Prime Minister Velthera sat in the front row, kept alive by human medical technology. Her people, the proud Vorthak, who had once controlled galactic banking, now served as junior administrators in human-run financial systems. Chancellor Xeris of the Zephyrians was there too, breathing easily for the first time in months thanks to human-developed treatments. His entire species now lived under human medical protection, their lives dependent on continued human goodwill. The galaxy needs hierarchy, Director Moon continued. It needs species that are capable of making hard decisions and accepting responsibility for the consequences. It needs leaders who can see beyond immediate profit and short-term advantage. The alien delegates listened in silence. Some looked resentful, others seemed relieved. All of them understood that they had no choice but to accept the new reality. Ambassador Young-Sik Choi, now Director of Alien Relations, stood to address the specific concerns of various species. But his role was no longer to negotiate or request. He was there to inform the aliens of human decisions and ensure compliance. The Vorthak banking systems will be integrated into the Human Economic Authority, he announced. The Zephyrian gas extraction operations will be managed by human engineers. The Luminar crystal production will be supervised by human technicians. It wasn't slavery. The aliens retained their basic freedoms and cultural autonomy. But every important decision, every major policy, every response to threats would be made by humans. The galaxy had learned that some responsibilities were too important to leave to species that had proven themselves incapable. The new system worked. Trade resumed under human protection. Diseases were controlled by human medical research. Pirates and warlords were eliminated by human military forces. The Void Hunters, faced with organized resistance for the first time in millennia, were driven back beyond the galaxy's edge. Most importantly, the galaxy was at peace. Without the constant bickering and power struggles of the old council system, conflicts were resolved quickly and efficiently. Human administrators made decisions based on practical concerns rather than political advantage. 10 years later, Commander Jinhei Ryu stood in the observation deck of Sanctuary Station, now the headquarters of the Human Border Guard. Through the transparent walls, she could see a steady stream of ships passing through the checkpoint, alien merchants under human escort, scientific vessels conducting research under human supervision, colony ships carrying families to new worlds under human protection. "Ma'am," called Lieutenant Sumin Park, now a senior officer, "we have a request from the Altarian Colonial Authority. They want to expand their mining operations to a new asteroid belt." "Approved," Jinhei replied without hesitation. "Assign a human engineering team to oversee the project." It was routine now. The aliens had learned to work within the human system. They prospered under human protection and guidance, and most of them had come to prefer it to the chaos and uncertainty of the old council system. A new generation of aliens was growing up who had never known any other way. They learned human languages in school, studied human history and philosophy, and competed for positions in the human administrative system. To them, human leadership wasn't oppression. It was simply the natural order of things. The older generation, those who remembered the independent council system, served as advisors and cautionary tales. They told stories of the time when species tried to govern themselves, when wars broke out over trivial disputes, when entire civilizations collapsed because they lacked proper leadership. "We had our chance," former Prime Minister Velthara told her granddaughter, who was studying to become a junior administrator in the human system. "We threw it away because we were too proud to listen to wisdom." Her granddaughter nodded respectfully, but she didn't really understand. The idea of aliens trying to govern themselves seemed as foolish to her as children trying to run a nuclear power plant. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through force, though they possessed overwhelming military superiority. They had conquered it through competence, reliability, and the simple demonstration that they could solve problems other species couldn't handle. The galaxy was safer, more prosperous, and more peaceful than it had been in recorded history. Every alien species understood, with perfect clarity,